President Donald Trump is scheduled to speak with Vladimir Putin on Tuesday to discuss potential terms for ending the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine. While some officials hope for a breakthrough and warn that these discussions may amount to another round of stalled negotiations, given Russia's continued territorial demands and Ukraine's firm stance on sovereignty. The talks are expected to address critical issues including territorial concessions by Kiev and control of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff recently met with Kremlin officials to propose an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, aiming to create room for preliminary peace negotiations. However, Ukrainian officials have expressed skepticism about the proposal, emphasizing that any ceasefire must not come at the expense of Ukraine's territorial integrity. Kiev has not been directly involved in these discussions, further fueling concerns about decisions being made without Ukraine's full participation. Hello, I'm Slavie, and this is Echoes of War News Brief on channel Yarochenko, bringing you the latest on Ukraine's fight for sovereignty and its global impact through an American-Ukrainian lens. Today we'll cover major shifts in US, European, and Canadian policies, Russia's latest demands, and global reactions. In a bid to advance peace negotiations, President Trump is reportedly considering officially recognizing Crimea as Russian territory. This move would align the U.S. with Russia's long-standing claim over the region and could potentially facilitate progress in ceasefire discussions. However, such a decision is contentious and may have significant geopolitical implications, particularly concerning international law and Ukraine's territorial sovereignty. The United States has informed European officials of its decision to withdraw from International Center for the Prosecution of Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, a multinational group established to investigate leaders responsible for the invasion, including Russian President Vladimir Putin. This move marks marks a significant shift in U.S. foreign policy under the Trump administration, which seeks to restore ties with Moscow while pushing for a swift peace deal in Ukraine. The decision also includes reducing the Justice Department's War Crimes Accountability Team, raising concerns about the future efforts to hold Russian leaders accountable for alleged war crimes. Several European countries are reevaluating their contracts with US-based companies, citing geopolitical concerns and recent actions by Elon Musk. The European Organization for the Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites has canceled its contracts with SpaceX for launching weather satellites, opting instead to support European launch providers. This decision aligns with the European Union's broader strategy to reduce reliance on non-European satellite services, especially after concerns about potential overdependence of SpaceX's Starlink network for critical communications. The European Organization for the Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites has canceled its contracts with SpaceX for launching weather satellites, opting instead to support European launch providers. This decision aligns with the European Union's broader strategy to reduce reliance on non-European satellite services, especially after concerns about potential overdependence on SpaceX's Starlink network for critical communication. Portugal has decided against purchasing US-made F-35 fighter jets, expressing concerns over the United States' unpredictable foreign policy under Donald Trump. Defense Minister Nuno Melo emphasized the need to consider the geopolitical environment in defense procurement decisions. Similarly, other NATO countries are exploring alternatives to the F-35, reflecting apprehensions about potential operational restrictions and the reliability of U.S. support. Tesla has experienced a significant decline in European sales, with a 45% drop in January compared to the same month last year. This downturn is attributed to growing consumer backlash against CEO Elon Musk's political affiliations and support for far-right pro-Russia figures across Europe. Protests and calls for boycotts have emerged in multiple countries, including Portugal, Germany, France, and the Netherlands, where demonstrators have staged rallies outside Tesla showrooms, urging customers to reconsider purchasing the brand, amplifying concerns over Musk's political ties and actions. These developments highlight a shifting landscape in Europe's defense and technology sectors, driven by geopolitical considerations and public sentiment. The Kremlin has escalated its rhetoric, warning that any deployment of Western peacekeepers in Ukraine would be considered a direct military confrontation with Russia. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Moscow rejects any NATO-led mission in Ukraine and insists that Russia must be included in all discussions regarding peace terms. Lavrov also reiterated Russia's core demands, which include a permanent ban on Ukraine joining NATO, recognition of Russian sovereignty over occupied territories, including Crimea and parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, and a demilitarized Ukraine with strict limitations on its armed forces. These demands remained unacceptable to Kiev and its allies, reinforcing the ongoing deadlock. Ukrainian officials have dismissed Russia's position as an attempt to dictate surrender terms rather than pursue genuine peace. Western leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, have condemned Moscow's ultimatums, stating that Ukraine alone decides its future, not the Kremlin. French President Emmanuel Macron has stated that the decision to deploy peacekeeping troops in Ukraine rests solely with Kiev and does not require Moscow's approval. He emphasized that if Ukraine requests allied forces on its territory, Russia has no authority to veto it. This stance reinforces France's commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and comes in response to Russia's firm opposition to the deployment of NATO peacekeepers. The Kremlin has warned that such actions could escalate the war, insisting that Russia must be involved in all discussions regarding Ukraine's future. In response to the evolving situation, European nations led by the United Kingdom and France, along with Turkey, Canada, and Australia, are formulating a peacekeeping initiative to support Ukraine. The UK has committed to deploying troops indefinitely, while France is considering mobilizing civilians by organizing volunteer brigades for non-combat roles, such as logistical support, medical aid, and reconstruction efforts in Ukraine. This coalition aims to send up to 30,000 troops to patrol Ukraine's borders and ensure adherence to ceasefire terms. Despite threats from Russia, including warnings such as deployments, European leaders emphasized the necessity of supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and security. Over the past weekend, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators took to the streets in Eastern European capitals, including Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest, Warsaw, Prague, and Vienna, to protest against pro-Russian leaders and express solidarity with Ukraine. These large-scale protests reflect a growing public sentiment against Russian influence and a call for stronger support for European integration. In Budapest, Hungary, massive crowds gathered to protest against Prime Minister Viktor Orban's policies, which are perceived as aligning too closely with Moscow. Protesters voiced their opposition to Orban's stance on the Russian invasion of Ukraine and his government's erosion of democratic principles. Demonstrations signify a significant public pushback against the administration's pro-Russian orientation. Belgrade, Serbia also witnessed substantial anti-Russian protests, with citizens rallying against President Alexander Vucic's close ties to the Kremlin. Demonstrators called for a shift towards European Union integrations and condemned Russia's actions in Ukraine. The protests highlight a growing desire among Serbians to distance their country from Russian influence and align more closely with Western democracies. Romania, thousands rallied to support the European Union amid political tensions over the forthcoming presidential election rerun. The initial election was annulled due to alleged Russian meddling in favor of the leading candidate, Kălin Georgescu, who is now barred from participating. Protesters displayed EU and Romanian flags, chanted anti-Russian slogans, and endorsed a manifesto for Europe, advocating for European unity and democratic values. O inimă românească ce bate pentru Europa. Prague, Czech Republic, saw thousands rallying in front of the Russian embassy, demanding stronger sanctions against Moscow and the expulsion of Russian diplomats accused of spreading disinformation. Protesters carried banners condemning the Kremlin's war and calling on European leaders to take tougher actions against Russian propaganda networks. In Vienna, Austria, a solidarity march brought together thousands of people, including Ukrainian expatriates, Austrians, and members of human rights organizations, calling for stronger European action against Russian aggression and continued humanitarian support for Ukrainian refugees. These widespread protests across Eastern Europe underscore a significant shift in public opinion, prompting responses from several governments. In Hungary, opposition leaders have called for new elections, while in Slovakia, lawmakers are debating measures to curb Russian influence in domestic politics, with citizens increasingly advocating for democratic governance, European integration, and a firm stance against Russian aggression. Tensions between United States and Canada have escalated due to new U.S. tariffs and controversial remarks from President Donald Trump. The Trump administration recently imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian imports, citing economic security concerns. In response, Canada announced retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, further straining the trade relationships between the two allies. Canadian officials warned that these measures could harm both economies, leading to increased costs for consumers and businesses on both sides of the border. President Trump's recent suggestion that Canada could become the 51st state has sparked outrage in Ottawa. Newly appointed Prime Minister Mark Carney, who succeeded Justin Trudeau on March 14th, condemned the remarks as reckless and insulting to Canadian sovereignty. Carney emphasized that Canada will not be bullied and has reached out to European allies to reinforce its international partnerships amid rising tensions with Washington. In his first overseas trip as Prime Minister, Carney met with British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron to seek support and strengthen diplomatic and economic cooperation in response to uncertainty in US-Canada relations. Both European leaders expressed solidarity with Canada but refrained from directly condemning Trump's actions, aiming to avoid further escalation while seeking US cooperation on other international matters.
Big mistake. Big. Huge. I have to go shopping now.
As tensions escalate across multiple geopolitical fronts, from Ukraine's fights for sovereignty to fractures in US-Canada relations and shifting European alliances, it is clear that how this war ends will shape the future of global security for generations to come. The outcome of this war is not just about Ukraine, it is about the future of the international order, the strength of alliances, and the credibility of democracies in standing up to authoritarian aggression. If Ukraine prevails, it will enforce the principle that sovereignty cannot be erased by force, ensuring stability and security for democratic nations worldwide. If Russia is allowed to succeed, it will embolden axis of evil in its multipolar world ambitions. For the United States, it is becoming increasingly clear that Trump is playing into Russia's wants and demands through appeasements, a strategy that history has shown to be extremely dangerous. Despite what Putin tells Trump, Russia does not want peace. It wants domination. A failure to stand firmly with Ukraine could weaken U.S. influence, undermine NATO, and send dangerous message to adversaries that America is retreating from its role as the leader of the free world. The decisions made in Washington, Brussels, and beyond will determine whether the 21st century is one of democratic resilience or authoritarian expansion. Your support is vital in helping us continue with the production of these videos. Contributions help fund production costs, ensuring we can deliver accurate, timely, and frequent video content. You can contribute to our production costs through Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below. Heartfelt thank you to everyone who has donated. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video to stay informed and help spread the word. Together, we can make a difference and promote informed discourse on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's it for today's Echoes of War News Brief. Thank you for all of your engagement and for joining this critical discussion as it affects all of us. God bless America and all of those who fight for freedom, liberty, and democracy. And of course, Slava Ukraini!